So let's talk about Elizabeth I. I mean, here's a queen who was basically born into scandal.
It's an unbelievable origin story, really.
Declared illegitimate, imprisoned by her own sister, and yet she somehow manages to pull England out of, well, total chaos and into its golden age.
It all starts in 1533. But the stability, it didn't last. Her mother, Anne Boleyn, was executed when Elizabeth was just 2 years old.
Just two. And right after that, she's declared illegitimate, loses her place in line for the throne. That kind of instability, it just sets the tone for her entire youth.
It absolutely does. Survival becomes her main goal.
And she had to navigate the reigns of her half-brother, Edward, and then her notoriously Catholic half-sister, Mary.
Exactly. She couldn't afford a single political misstep. Her life was genuinely on the line.
And she was incredibly well-educated, right? Spoke multiple languages.
Oh, absolutely. Latin, Greek, you name it. But her real education was in caution. She even spent time locked up in the Tower of London under suspicion of plotting against Queen Mary. So all of that incredibly difficult childhood, it built the intelligence and the sheer caution she would need to be queen.
Which happened in 1558. She's 25 years old, and she inherits a country that is bankrupt and just violently divided over religion.
And that's her first job, her biggest job, really, solving that religious crisis.
Because at this point, you have these hardline Catholics and hardline Protestants. It's a recipe for civil war.
For sure. She saw what was happening in the rest of Europe, countries tearing themselves apart. She knew she had to find a different path.
So she didn't just swing the pendulum all the way back. She looked for what they called the middle way.
The middle way. And she made it law, and she did it fast. In 1559, she passes two huge acts. The first is the Act of Supremacy.
Which made her the head of the church.
Almost. It made her the supreme governor of the Church of England, a subtle but, very important distinction for a woman at the time. But she was the boss.
Okay, so that's one. What was the second?
The Act of Uniformity. And this one was all about standardizing how people worshipped. It meant everyone had to go to the same kind of church service, use the same prayer book. It was pure political genius.
So what did that compromise actually look like inside the church? Was it more Catholic or more Protestant?
Well, that's the clever part. The core teachings, the theology, that was definitely Protestant. But, and this is key, she kept a lot of the traditional ceremonies, the look and feel of it.
So priests still wore robes, there were decorations.
Exactly. Things that felt familiar to the average person who was used to the old Catholic traditions. It was designed specifically to stop a mass rebellion.
So it sounds like she cared more about people showing up and being outwardly obedient than what they actually, believed in their hearts.
That is it, 100%. Which is where her famous quote comes from. She said she did not want to make windows into men's souls.
Meaning, as long as you were loyal on the outside, what you thought in private was your business.
Your business. And that strategy kept England peaceful for decades, while the rest of Europe was just burning.
Okay, so that religious peace is the foundation. But it's under constant threat, especially when it comes to her personal life. The pressure on her to marry must have been immense.
Oh, relentless. Parliament, her advisors, pretty much the whole country wanted her to marry and, crucially, produce an heir to secure the Tudor dynasty.
So why didn't she? What was the big risk?
The risks were enormous. If she married a foreigner, say a Spanish or French prince, England basically becomes a pawn in their game. It gets dragged into their wars, loses its independence.
Right. But what about marrying an English noble?
Just as dangerous, maybe more so. The second she picks one powerful English family, all the others get jealous and start fighting. It would have created massive factions at court. Civil war was a real possibility.
So her solution was to just not get married at all. She becomes the Virgin Queen.
Exactly. A totally shocking decision for the time. But she was a master of political branding. She told her people she was married to the nation of England.
And that gave her complete control. No husband telling her what to do.
Total control. But here's the massive paradox we have to talk about. Her choice guaranteed stability during her reign.
But it created a huge question mark for the future. No heir meant potential chaos after she died.
And she used that uncertainty. She weaponized her single status. You had the two superpowers, Spain and France, both wanting to control England.
And King Philip of Spain, who was married to her sister Mary, he even proposed, right?
He did. He wanted to bring England back to Catholicism. She turned him down flat. But she never completely took marriage off the table with other suitors.
Ah, so she kept them all guessing.
Always. She dangled the prospect of marriage as a diplomatic tool. By playing Spain and France against each other, she basically prevented a full-scale invasion for 30 years.
It's brilliant high-stakes politics. But the biggest threat wasn't actually from abroad, was it? It was right there, in England.
It was her cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots.
The ultimate rival.
The ultimate rival. Mary Stuart was Catholic, and to many Catholics in England, she was the rightful queen. They didn't recognize Elizabeth's father's divorce.
And then Mary flees Scotland and shows up in England in 1568. What an impossible situation for Elizabeth.
Truly, you can't just kill another anointed queen, but you can't let her roam free, becoming the center of every plot against you.
So she puts her under house arrest.
For almost 20 years, it was a very comfortable imprisonment, but an imprisonment nonetheless. And during that time, there were constant plots to assassinate Elizabeth and put Mary on the throne.
This is where the spies come in, right? The Babington plot.
This was the big one. Mary was caught sending secret coded letters to plotters planning to kill Elizabeth. But Elizabeth's spymaster, Francis Walsingham, had this incredibly sophisticated network.
So they weren't just aware of the plot, they were reading her mail.
They were intercepting and decoding everything. They caught her red-handed, proving she was directly involved in the assassination plot.
And that forced Elizabeth's hand.
It did. Parliament insisted. They said Mary was a constant danger to the kingdom. Elizabeth really agonized over it, but eventually, for the safety of the country, she signed the death warrant. Mary was beheaded in 1587.
And that single act gives King Philip of Spain the final excuse he needs to invade.
The ultimate showdown. The Spanish Armada, 1588. He sends this massive fleet, 130 ships, to conquer England once and for all.
On paper, the odds looked impossible for England.
They did. But the English had a couple of key advantages. First was their ships.
Right, the Spanish had these huge, slow galleons, basically troop carriers.
While the English had smaller, faster, and much more nimble ships, they were perfect for the English Channel.
And this is when Elizabeth gives that legendary speech to her troops at Tilbury.
A huge moment. She rides out in front of her soldiers and says she has the heart and stomach of a king and of a king of England, too. It was an incredible morale boost.
But in the end, it really came down to strategy and fire ships.
A devastatingly effective tactic. They took old ships, packed them with anything that would burn, set them ablaze, and just sent them sailing into the tightly packed Spanish formation in the middle of the night.
Caused total panic. The Armada scattered, their defensive formation was broken.
And then came what the English saw as an act of God.
The weather.
A series of massive storms in the North Atlantic. As the Spanish tried to retreat, their ships were wrecked against the coasts of Scotland and Ireland. The English called it the Protestant wind.
That victory was just transformative. It cemented Elizabeth's reputation and basically announced England's arrival as a major naval power.
It was the springboard for everything that followed. This is when the Elizabethan era becomes a time of global discovery.
Right, guys like Sir Francis Drake. He wasn't just an explorer, he was basically a state-sponsored pirate.
A privateer, yes. He sails around the world between 1577 and 1580, and along the way captures a staggering amount of Spanish treasure. He comes home a national hero.
And that taste for global profit fuels more exploration. Walter Raleigh tries to set up the Roanoke colony in North America.
Which fails, the lost colony, but it paves the way for what comes later. And at the same time, you see the rise of these huge trading companies.
Like the East India Company.
Exactly. And you need to understand, this wasn't just a normal business. Elizabeth granted it a royal monopoly, only they were allowed to trade with the East Indies. This funneled immense wealth, spices, and silk back to England.
And this global trade started changing daily life, right? New products start showing up.
Oh, yeah. Things like tobacco and potatoes are introduced, and they completely change English society, especially for the growing merchant class.
So, shifting from the global stage back to her court. It was the absolute center of power and culture. How did she manage all those ambitious, powerful men?
She was a genius at it. She used something called the patronage system. Instead of letting nobles get too powerful with their own armies, she'd reward her loyal supporters with jobs or land or monopolies. She'd give one guy the exclusive right to import wine, or another the only license to make playing cards.
So you tied their personal fortune directly to her good favor. If you rebelled, you lost everything.
Precisely. It kept them competing for her attention, not plotting against her. She was also famously careful with money.
Which is where her progresses come in, these big royal tours.
They were basically a massive cost-saving measure. The queen and her entire court would go and stay at the country houses of her wealthiest nobles.
And the nobles had to foot the entire bill.
The whole thing. Feasts, entertainment, lodging. It saved the crown a fortune, and it was a smart way for her to be seen by her people all over the country.
But when we say golden age, we're really talking about the culture, the explosion in literature and theater.
It's an unparalleled moment. This is the age of William Shakespeare. He's writing Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet. You've got Christopher Marlowe, Ben Jonson, and the printing press helps spread these works everywhere.
And theater becomes the main form of entertainment for everyone. The first permanent playhouses, like the Globe, are built.
And if you were poor, you could buy a cheap ticket and stand right in front of the stage. They were called the groundlings. All the plays had to be in the afternoon, of course, because there was no artificial light.
And here's a key detail you have to remember. All the actors were men. Women were not allowed on stage.
So all the female parts, Juliet, Cleopatra, they were all played by young boys whose voices hadn't changed yet.
It's incredible to think about. But while the rich are enjoying all this culture, life, for most people, was pretty tough.
Incredibly stratified. You had a strict hierarchy. The queen on top, then nobles, gentry, merchants, and then the vast majority of people, poor laborers and farmers.
And Elizabeth's government had to deal with poverty. They passed the Poor Laws.
The poor laws are really interesting. They were kind of revolutionary because they created a system to help people who genuinely couldn't work. The elderly, the sick, the parish had to take care of them.
But it wasn't just charity. There was a harsh side to it, too.
A very harsh side. If you were healthy but unemployed, they called them sturdy beggars, you were seen as a criminal and could be punished severely. It was a system designed to provide help, but also to enforce social order.
And for most people, daily life was just simple. Small houses made of timber and mud, thatched roofs.
And your diet told everyone in your class? The rich ate tons of meat, but most people lived on bread, cheese, and a vegetable stew called pottage.
As the 1600s began, Elizabeth was getting older. Her health was failing, and many of her closest advisors had died.
She died in March of 1603. She was 69, and the moment everyone had dreaded for decades had finally arrived.
The end of the Tudor line. The Virgin Queen had no children, no heir.
But her ministers had been planning secretly for years. The transition of power was incredibly smooth. They had already arranged for her cousin, King James VI of Scotland, to take the throne.
Uniting the crowns of England and Scotland for the very first time.
So if you think about it, Elizabeth I inherited a nation that was on the verge of total collapse. It was facing bankruptcy, invasions, civil war.
And her genius was in compromise and caution. She used her unmarried status to keep control. She defeated the world's biggest superpower. And she launched an age of culture and exploration that still defines England today.
She left England stable, prosperous, and a recognized world power. She proved that a clever single woman could rule just as effectively as any king.
Now, here's a final thought for you to chew on. Elizabeth's stability rested entirely on her ability to keep her private beliefs private. How often in history do we see rulers succeed by prioritizing political compromise over their personal convictions?
An interesting question indeed. Good luck with your studies.